When it comes to fantasy series, trilogies are by far the dominant series length. I'm closing in on having read 50 completed sci-fi and fantasy series, and almost half of them are trilogies. This shelf alone down here has 5 completed trilogies on it with an additional incomplete trilogy. But when I'm looking at the list of series I've completed and I rank them in order from favorite to least favorite, trilogies aren't really found at the top of that list. There's an occasional one or two there, but the most common length is actually a 4-book series or a tetralogy. So today I want to go over my top 5 tetralogies. And coming at number 5, and I bet most booktubers would actually have this higher up on their list than I do, but that's The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. This is a fast-paced, action-packed, epic fantasy, and I really like how he plays with the chosen one trope in it. There's characters you can root for, characters you hate rooting for, characters you want to root for even though you know they're on the wrong side, and characters you enjoy just rooting against. But most importantly, it has some iconic animal companions. In short, this is generally exactly what I would look for in an epic fantasy. Except he overuses one particular writing technique. And this writing technique on its own is fine, and if it's used sparingly, I get it, there's a time and a place for it, but he overuses it. And that overuse really dampened any emotional impact I had during the story, and it took me out of the story, and it made me start looking for when he was doing this rather than looking for where the story was going. So that kind of lowered the ceiling on my thoughts on Faithful and the Fallen, bringing it down to number 5. If it wasn't for that, probably be higher up on the list, or at least competing for the top 4. But right now, this is squarely in 5th place on my list. At number 4, you have War for the Rose Throne by Peter McLean. This is more of a character-focused, grimdark story about almost like a mob boss returning from a brutal war and finding that his territories have all been taken from him and he wants them back. You could say this is exactly what I don't look for in my fantasy series. It's darker, there's not a ton of plot, especially in the first book, but I absolutely loved it in spite of it being completely contrary to what I would normally pick up. These characters are pretty much all mentally damaged and very traumatized. Thomas Piety, the leader of the gang, he on the surface looks to be the least damaged of all of them, but in reality, he's probably the most damaged, and following his story and seeing what decisions he makes and why he makes them and just which way he's going to go is absolutely fascinating. And I really enjoyed all 4 books in this series. Coming in at number 3 is Superpowers by Drew Hayes. This is a superhero fantasy where you have 5 teenagers that are going to college to become superheroes. I know there's a lot of people out there that complain about academia and fantasy and that they don't like school settings, but when a school setting is done right, it can bring so much to the world and to the story. Most of us have gone to school of some sort and can relate to what they're going through. So any gaps in the world building or just expanding the world building with our own imagination, it's a lot easier to do because we have something we can relate back to. So we can just let our imagination fill in any gaps and expand the story. And we can relate to the characters because we've been there. We know what it's like to stress about a test. We know about the social anxiety of trying to fit in, the nervousness of a project that's coming up, having a teacher that seemingly despises you and another teacher that is a mentor to you. You can relate to that, and it really helps the reader bond with the characters. Basically, when done right, a school setting can really transport the reader into the story and make them feel like they're going to school and going to classes and living their lives with the main characters. And no series has done that as well as Superpowers. This is the first series I read as an adult that gave me that feeling as strong as what I had when I read Harry Potter as a kid, of wishing I was there with them. And Superpowers is just an absolute blast. It's a great time. Imagine the wildest college stories you can think of, but now put superpowers in with them. And the test they're studying for isn't something like whether or not you know the derivative of the natural log of x. Instead, their test is taking their team with their unique superpowers and going up against another team with their own powers and trying to win capture the flag. So it's just a fun time, the whole story. It does have a good hidden plot in the back that builds throughout all 4 books and really culminates in the last half of book 4. So it does a good job of just hinting that even though the story itself is fun, there's something more going on. And when they get through their schooling, they're going to have their work cut out for them. Coming in at number 2 is The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell. You have 3 traveling magistrates that are traveling the land trying to uphold the law. The problem is, the law they're trying to uphold is the king's law. And the last king was overthrown and killed 5 years ago. So they're wandering through a country that doesn't like them, doesn't want them, and would be perfectly happy if someone happened to kill all of them. So they're wandering around a pretty treacherous area and trying to figure out what exactly the king wished them to do when he sent them out on their last mission the day that he died. One of the things I think the series does amazingly well at is the scope keeps climbing, it keeps building, fighting men to fighting saints to fighting against gods, but in the end it all circles back to, can Falcio uphold the law? That's what it's all about. He's the first cantor of the Greatcoats. Can he do his duty and uphold the law? Even if it's against everything he wants to happen, can he continue to enforce the law? Besides the plot, the series is really known for having fantastic banter. The other series that come to mind are R'yr Revelations and Lies of Locke Lamora whenever you have a conversation of best banter. For me, I put the Greatcoats at the top of that list. Adding to that, Sebastian's writing style is so unique. I've never read anything else like it, how he switches from first person to second person. Again, that's something that I would have expected to hate it, but I love it. It just draws me in when the main character is literally talking to me and explaining how he's doing something or why he's doing something and teaching me a lesson as we're going through the story. So I really enjoy that aspect of it, and it's something that has kept me going back to all of Sebastian de Castell's books, is that particular writing style. And my favorite tetralogy, at least for today, the top 3 on this list are pretty much tied, so if you ask me tomorrow, they might be in a different order. But for today, my number 1 tetralogy is Mother of Learning by Damagaj Kermaic, or Nobody 103. This is a time loop fantasy that really surprised me with how much I enjoyed it. Imagine you were able to live 1 month over and over and over again. Anything you learn, any new skills you accumulate, any memories you have, they all stick with you. But any money you spend, any relationships you build, any physical harm you take, they all get erased and set back to the beginning of the month. What would you do with that? Would you spend all of your time traveling because any money you spend is gonna just be reset? Would you spend your time learning and trying to develop a skill and just mastering something that you really enjoy to the point where you can make a career out of it, and once you get out of that time loop, you're set for life? Would you try discovering secrets? Would you try breaking into places and just taking ridiculous chances because at the end of the month you're going to be reset? Now, while you're thinking about that, I do have to add that there are a few catches. 1, you don't know why you're in this time loop. 2, you don't know how to get out of the time loop. And 3, you don't know when the time loop is going to end. So for all you know, any given month that you're living might be the month that you continue. So if you stop showing up to work and start traveling and you get fired, well, one of these times that might actually stick and you have no idea which way it is. So if that was the situation you were in, who would you become? What would you learn? What would you do? Oh yeah, there's one more thing. Everyone you know, all of your friends, family, acquaintances, they all end up dying at the end of the month. That's what Mother of Learning is. And it was really entertaining and really fascinating trying to figure out how to get out of the time loop, how to solve the crisis, and just the different options that they take. And it was a joy to read, and I absolutely recommend it. So those are my 5 favorite tetralogies. Let me know if you have a favorite tetralogy, or do you have a favorite series length that you prefer? And until next time, bye.